secrets hidden beneath waves, untouched by European eyes. Into this great unknown sailed a man whose ambition and curiosity pushed the boundaries of the world as it was known. Cook was no ordinary sailor. He was a man who dared to challenge the mysteries of the globe, navigating through treacherous waters, sketching maps that would forever alter the course of history, from the frozen reaches of the Antarctic to the sun-drenched islands of the Pacific. Captain Cook ventured where few had ever dreamed. His voyages didn't just expand the geographical knowledge of his time, but reshaped the way humanity understood the world and its many cultures. Today, we embark on a serene journey through the life of Captain James Cook, a man whose voyages not only charted the unknown, but connected continents and peoples in ways that still resonate today. As we turn the pages of his remarkable story, the soft sounds of discovery, page turning, pen scratching on parchment, the light tap of fingers on a globe, will guide us, gently leading us through his life's incredible path. But before Cook sailed into the great unknown, before he became a legend, he was a boy with dreams. Let's step back in time to the humble beginnings of a man who would one day map the world. What were his early ambitions, and how did they set him on this extraordinary path? Let's find out. James Cook was born in 1728 in the quiet village of Marton, Yorkshire, far from the bustling ports and vast oceans that would one day define his life. His beginnings were humble, his father a hard-working farm labourer, and from an early age young James learned the value of discipline and dedication. The family's life was modest, but it was in the simplicity of the countryside that Cook developed an unshakable work ethic, a trait that would serve him well on the open seas. Yet, for all the grounding in rural life, there was something else stirring in young Cook's heart, an unquenchable curiosity that would soon lead him far beyond the fields of Yorkshire. The world outside the confines of his small village whispered to him, calling him towards something greater, while others in his village were content to follow the path laid before them. Cook felt a pull toward the unknown. There was a sense of destiny, something he couldn't quite explain, but it was there in every gust of wind that swept through the trees, and in the distant sound of the waves crashing against the shore. He had an unyielding curiosity for the seas, which led him away from his rural upbringing, historian J.C. Beaglehole once wrote, capturing the essence of Cook's early ambitions. Even in his youth, there was a fire in him, a desire not just to see the world, but to understand it. At the age of 16, Cook left the comfort of his family home to apprentice under a Quaker ship owner in the bustling coastal town of Whitby. This was no easy decision for a boy from a small farming community, but Cook had his sights set on the horizon, and nothing would deter him. In Whitby, he learned the art of shipbuilding, navigation, and the unforgiving realities of life at sea. He was no longer a boy with dreams, but a young man ready to shape his own destiny. The apprenticeship was rigorous, as Cook found himself immersed in the day-to-day operations of a maritime town. Whitby, with its salty air and ships lining the harbour, was a place where the rhythm of life was dictated by the tide. Cook worked long hours, often under the harsh eye of his master, learning the skills that would one day make him one of the greatest navigators in history. He developed a deep respect for the sea and all its moods, the calm serenity of a glassy ocean at dawn, the ferocity of a storm that could tear a ship apart, and the endless challenge of navigating its unpredictable waters. It was in Whitby that Cook's understanding of the world began to take shape, piece by piece, like the maps he would one day draw so meticulously. But his apprenticeship wasn't just about hard work. It was here that Cook found his first true love, the sea. He would spend hours poring over charts, watching as the ships came and went, each carrying stories of distant lands and exotic adventures. The waves became his teacher, the winds his guide. There was a romance to it all, and as he stood on the docks, watching the ships disappear over the horizon, he knew deep down that this was where he belonged. Cook's rise wasn't fueled by privilege or wealth, but by sheer determination. He wasn't born into a naval family. There were no expectations for him to become anything more than a farmhand. But Cook had something that many lacked: ambition, an insatiable thirst for knowledge, and an unwavering drive to better himself. The sea wasn't just a career, it was his passion, his purpose, and the gateway to everything he had ever imagined. Yet, life at sea was not without its challenges. As an apprentice, Cook faced the harsh realities of the maritime world. The work was grueling, the conditions oft brutal, and the sea itself could be a cruel master. He saw men break under the pressure, their spirits crushed by the relentless demands of the ocean. But Cook thrived. Each hardship only strengthened his resolve, pushing him further toward his goal of mastering the art of navigation. As his apprenticeship came to an end, Cook had transformed from a boy with dreams into a man with the skills and knowledge needed to pursue his ambitions. He had become well versed in shipbuilding, navigation, and the operations of maritime life. But, more importantly, he had developed a deep connection to the sea, one that would define the rest of his life. Though his time in Whitby had taught him much, Cook knew there was more to learn, more to see. His heart still longed for adventure, for the unknown. He wasn't content to stay in one place. The world was too vast, too full of possibilities. The next chapter in his life was calling. The Royal Navy, with its promise of new horizons and challenges, would be the place where Cook's true potential could flourish. Just as the tides change, so too did Cook's journey. The sea had only begun to reveal its secrets, and now he would take the next step in his incredible voyage, a step that would lead him to the heart of the British Empire and beyond. His journey from apprentice to naval officer was just beginning, and the open waters of the world awaited him. In 1755, with the 7 Years' War looming over Europe, James Cook made a decision that would forever alter the course of his life and the world. He enlisted in the Royal Navy, leaving behind the small port town of Whitby, where he had spent years honing his craft. For a man of his talents and ambition, the Navy was a natural next step. It was a world of discipline, order, and structure, a place where the most capable men could rise through the ranks, no matter their humble beginnings. Cook had no prestigious background or family connections to rely on, but what he did have was an extraordinary mind and an unwavering work ethic. At first, Cook's entry into the Royal Navy may have seemed like the logical path for any skilled sailor. However, Cook wasn't like most men, where others saw the endless demands of military service. Cook saw opportunity. He recognised that the Navy was not just a place to serve. It was a place to learn, to grow, and to push himself to the very limits of his abilities. His time at sea had already shaped him, but the Navy would mould him into something greater. A navigator, a cartographer, a man whose name would be spoken in the same breath as the world's greatest explorers. Cook's mathematical skills quickly set him apart from his peers. His ability to chart and survey with precision earned him the attention of his superiors. They noticed how he could read the stars and navigate uncharted waters with an accuracy that few could match. The journals of his contemporaries often remarked on his meticulousness. In skillful navigation and map-making, few could match his precision and attention to detail, one entry read. It was here, in the demanding environment of naval life, that Cook's talents began to shine. His first major assignment came during the war, when he was sent to the distant shores of Canada. Here, in the cold, rugged landscapes of the St. Lawrence River and Newfoundland, Cook was given a task that would lay the foundation for his future career. He was to map the intricate waterways and coastal regions of the area, a job that required not only technical skill, but also an eye for detail. Cook threw himself into the work with the same dedication that had driven him since his youth. For days and nights, he toiled over maps, taking meticulous notes, observing the tides, and making adjustments to the charts. Every piece of land, every curve of the shoreline was recorded with an almost obsessive attention to detail. It wasn't long before Cook's maps of Newfoundland and the St. Lawrence River were regarded as some of the most accurate ever created. These weren't just drawings on paper. They were lifelines for sailors navigating treacherous waters. His work was so precise that it was used for decades after his death, a testament to his remarkable skill. But for Cook, this was just the beginning. The success of his efforts in Canada had proven that he was more than capable of handling larger tasks, and soon the Royal Navy took notice. Cook's superiors recognised that they had a man of extraordinary talent in their ranks. He was promoted, and with that promotion came even greater responsibilities. As his reputation for accuracy and reliability grew, so did his opportunities. His ability to combine mathematical expertise with practical seamanship set him apart from other officers. Where many relied on brute force or instinct, Cook relied on careful calculation and an unerring sense of direction. This combination of intellect and grit would serve him well in the years to come. But it wasn't just his skill that made Cook stand out. It was his determination. The grueling conditions of naval life, from the harsh weather to the endless hours at sea, were enough to break many men. Yet Cook remained focused, always pushing forward, always looking for the next challenge. Whether it was charting a new coastline or navigating through uncharted waters, Cook approached every task with the same level of dedication. He knew that the sea could be unforgiving, but it also held endless possibilities for those brave enough to explore its depths. During these years, Cook forged the qualities that would define him as a leader. He learned the importance of precision, discipline, and preparation. He also developed a deep respect for the men who served under him, understanding that a captain was only as strong as his crew. Cook was never a man to seek glory for himself. He saw his role as part of a larger mission, one that required the cooperation of every man on board. It was this humility and sense of purpose that earned him the loyalty and admiration of his crew, traits that would later serve him in his most famous voyages. As the war drew to a close, Cook's time in Canada had come to an end, but his career was only just beginning. His achievements in cartography had caught the attention of some of the most influential men in the British Navy, and they were eager to see what he could do next. By now, Cook had built a reputation not just as a skilled sailor, but as a visionary explorer, someone who could chart the unknown and bring back knowledge from the farthest corners of the world. He had proven his worth on the shores of Canada, but now a far greater challenge awaited him. The Pacific Ocean, vast, mysterious, and largely uncharted, was the next frontier for Cook. He had earned the chance to lead his own expedition, to set sail into waters that no European had ever explored. The British government had their eyes set on discovery, and they knew that Cook was the man to make it happen. With his commission secured, Cook was ready to embark on the most significant voyage of his life. His skills would be tested like never before as he ventured into uncharted territories, encountering lands and peoples that were unknown to the Western world. His first voyage would take him to the farthest reaches of the Pacific Ocean, a journey that would cement his place in history as one of the greatest explorers of all time. Now, the time had come for Cook to prove himself on a global stage, navigating the vast expanse of the Pacific. The seas he would cross were treacherous, but filled with promise, waiting for the man who dared to map their unknown shores. In 1768, Captain James Cook set sail on a journey that would change the world forever. His mission was twofold: a scientific endeavour and a voyage of discovery. The Royal Society, the prestigious group behind some of the era's most important scientific advancements, had commissioned Cook to observe the transit of Venus across the Sun. This astronomical event was critical in calculating the distance from Earth to the Sun, a mystery that had puzzled scientists for years. But there was another, more ambitious objective lurking behind this expedition: the exploration of the vast and largely uncharted Pacific Ocean. The Endeavour, Cook's ship, was more than just a vessel. It was a gateway to the unknown, to lands that few Europeans had ever set eyes upon. When the Endeavour departed from Plymouth in 1768, the air was thick with anticipation. Cook and his crew, a mixture of seasoned sailors and eager scientists, set course for the distant Pacific. The journey would be long and treacherous, but it was a voyage that promised to unlock secrets hidden across thousands of miles of ocean. As the ship cut through the Atlantic and made its way around the perilous Cape Horn, the men horizon. After months of sailing, braving rough seas and unforgiving storms, the Endeavour arrived in the idyllic waters of Tahiti. The island, with its lush greenery and warm tropical breezes, was unlike anything the crew had ever seen. It was here, in this paradise, that they would carry out their first objective, observing the transit of Venus. The people of Tahiti greeted Cook and his men with warmth and curiosity. We were received with much hospitality by the natives, who displayed great curiosity towards our ship. Cook wrote in his journal, "The Tahitians marvelled at the strange visitors from across the sea, just as Cook marvelled at their way of life, so different from his own." The scientific observations in Tahiti went off without a hitch, but for Cook, the true adventure was just beginning. With the transit of Venus complete, he turned his attention to the second phase of his mission, exploring the vast, uncharted waters of the Pacific. Cook was not just a captain, he was a cartographer of extraordinary skill, a man who could take the chaotic, ever-shifting sea and translate it into something precise and navigable. This talent would be put to the ultimate test as he set course for lands that had, up until now, existed only in rumour. The Endeavour sailed westward, navigating through islands and atolls that seemed to spring up out of the ocean like mirages. Each new landfall was a revelation. Tahiti had been only the first stop on a journey that would lead Cook to some of the most isolated and mysterious places on Earth. His maps became lifelines, meticulously charting every coastline, every inlet, and every reef that posed a danger to future sailors. He recorded the natural beauty of the islands, the peoples who inhabited them, and the complex ecosystems he encountered. But it was his next destination that would truly cement his place in history. In 1769, after navigating through the endless expanse of the Pacific, Cook and his crew made landfall in New Zealand. This was the first time Europeans had set foot on the islands since Arbel Tasman had briefly encountered them over a century earlier. But where Tasman had turned away, Cook pressed forward. He spent months meticulously charting the coastlines of both the North and South Islands, creating maps of unparalleled accuracy. These maps would prove invaluable for future navigators, opening up New Zealand to the wider world and transforming it from a remote corner of the globe into a place of interest and opportunity for European powers. Cook's keen eye and scientific approach allowed him to record not just the geography, but the essence of these lands. He described the towering mountains, the dense forests, and the rich wildlife that populated the islands. He noted the Maori people, whose culture fascinated and, at times, confounded him. There were moments of tension, misunderstandings that erupted into violence, but there were also moments of mutual curiosity and exchange. Cook's journal is filled with observations of the Maori's customs and traditions, offering a glimpse into a way of life that was entirely foreign to European eyes. After charting New Zealand, Cook set his sights on another goal, Australia's eastern coastline. In 1770, he made landfall at Botany Bay on what is now the southeastern coast of Australia. It was here that Cook, once again, achieved something remarkable. He meticulously mapped the coastline, recording every detail with the precision of a master cartographer. This was the first European contact with Australia's eastern shores, and Cook's maps of the area would become essential tools for future explorers. His skill with a compass and sextant transformed these distant, mysterious lands into something tangible, something that could be understood and navigated. The sheer scope of Cook's achievements on this voyage cannot be overstated. He had set out to observe a single astronomical event, but by the time the Endeavour returned to England in 1771, Cook had charted over 5,000 miles of coastline, discovered new lands, and forever altered the world's understanding of the Pacific. His maps were so precise, so detailed, that they were used by sailors for generations after his death. They became the foundation for future explorations, guiding others through the treacherous waters of the Pacific and leading to the eventual colonization of the lands he had mapped. As the Endeavour made its way back to England, Cook knew that he had accomplished something truly extraordinary. His maps, his observations, and his discoveries would change the way the world viewed the Pacific. But Cook's journey was far from over. He had seen firsthand the richness and diversity of the peoples who inhabited these lands, and his interactions with them had left a lasting impression on him. The Pacific was not just a blank canvas for European explorers. It was a living, breathing world filled with its own history, culture, and complexity. Cook's next challenge would be navigating not just the oceans, but the delicate and often fraught relationships with the indigenous peoples he encountered. As Cook prepared for the next leg of his journey, he couldn't help but reflect on the importance of these encounters. He had seen the power of mutual curiosity and respect, but he had also witnessed the potential for conflict and misunderstanding. The Pacific had shown him that the world was far more interconnected than anyone had realised, and his next voyages would test not just his skills as a navigator, but his understanding of humanity itself. Captain James Cook's voyages were not only marked by his extraordinary ability to map uncharted waters, but also by his encounters with the indigenous peoples of the lands he explored. These interactions would prove to be some of the most complex and challenging aspects of his expeditions. For all his talents as a navigator and cartographer, Cook was stepping into worlds that had their own deep histories, cultures, and ways of life, which often clashed with the European ideals he and his crew carried with them. In New Zealand, Cook's arrival in 1769 was met with both curiosity and suspicion by the Maori people. They were a fiercely proud and warrior-based society with traditions and beliefs deeply rooted in their land. At first, the Maori observed these strangers from the sea with intrigue, fascinated by the massive ship that had appeared on their shores, unlike anything they had ever seen. The Endeavour was not just a vessel. To the Maori, it was an imposing symbol of another world. Cook, ever the observer, documented the initial peaceful exchanges between his crew and the Maori. Gifts were exchanged, words shared, even if neither side truly understood the other. But peaceful moments were often fleeting. As the crew of the Endeavour ventured further inland, tensions grew. Misunderstandings about cultural customs and the differing values his journal, described an encounter that took a darker turn. They retreated with fierce determination, a reflection of their warrior culture. What began as a meeting of curiosity quickly turned into a standoff, the Maori defending their territory with unwavering resolve. Cook's crew, unsure of how to interpret the Maori's customs, often reacted with fear, and unfortunately, violence followed. Skirmishes broke out, leaving scars on both sides that would linger long after the Endeavour had sailed away. Cook's interactions with the Aboriginal peoples of Australia presented a different set of challenges. When the Endeavour arrived on the eastern coast of Australia in 1770, the land appeared vast and untouched, its natural beauty stretching as far as the eye could see. But it was far from empty. The Aboriginal Australians had lived there for tens of thousands of years, their connection to the land deeply spiritual and practical. Unlike the Maori, who greeted Cook with a mix of wariness and curiosity, the Aboriginal peoples were more reserved, watching from a distance as the Endeavour anchored near their shores. Cook's crew observed the Aboriginal peoples from afar, initially noting their skillful use of fire to manage the land, their simple yet effective tools, and their quiet, methodical way of life. The Europeans saw them as living in what they described as primitive conditions, but this only reflected their own limited understanding of the rich complexity of Aboriginal culture. As Cook's men ventured closer, trying to make contact, the Aboriginal peoples often chose not to engage, retreating into the bush, leaving behind little but the distant crackling of fire and soft bird calls echoing through the trees. Though there were fewer violent clashes in Australia compared to New Zealand, the tension of the unknown hung heavily in the air. The cultural gulf between the two peoples was vast, and neither side had the tools to bridge it. Cook, however, recognised the Aboriginal people's deep knowledge of their environment. He recorded their expert use of the land, noting how they lived in harmony with nature, a concept foreign to his crew, who were used to altering the environment to suit their needs. There was a quiet respect in Cook's observations, though. Like many explorers of his time, he saw these peoples through the lens of European superiority, a perspective that would lead to dire consequences in the centuries to come. The impact of Cook's landings on indigenous populations went far beyond these initial encounters. Though Cook himself may not have fully realised it, his expeditions were the beginning of a new and often painful chapter for the indigenous peoples of the Pacific. His maps, so valuable for future explorers, also paved the way for colonisation. The arrival of Europeans brought not only new technologies and ideas, but also diseases, violence, and disruption to the indigenous ways of life. For the Maori, the arrival of European settlers in the decades that followed would lead to land disputes, wars, and the erosion of their cultural sovereignty. For the Aboriginal Australians, colonisation brought devastation as their lands were taken, their people displaced, and their traditions marginalised. In retrospect, Cook's voyages raised difficult ethical questions. At the time, European powers saw exploration as a noble pursuit, a way to bring civilization to the farthest reaches of the globe. But for the indigenous peoples whose lands were suddenly thrust into the spotlight of European interest, this was often the beginning of a long struggle for survival. Cook, for all his brilliance as a navigator, was also a man of his time, shaped by the imperialist mindset that viewed the world's indigenous peoples as obstacles or curiosities rather than equals. Cook's journals, written in his careful, measured style, reflect both his awe and his misunderstanding of the indigenous cultures he encountered. He marvelled at their resourcefulness, their resilience, and their deep connection to the land. But he also failed to fully grasp the weight of his own presence in their world. As we read his words today, we are reminded of the complexity of history. Cook's voyages were not just about discovery, they were about contact, sometimes peaceful, sometimes violent, and the lasting effects of those interactions are still felt by the descendants of the peoples he encountered. Cook's legacy, then, is a complicated one. He opened the door to a wider understanding of the Pacific, yet his voyages also set the stage for the challenges that would follow for indigenous populations. Today, we look back with a more critical eye, recognizing the duality of exploration, the thrill of discovery, and the consequences for those who were discovered. As Cook prepared for his next voyage, these experiences with indigenous peoples must have weighed on his mind. His curiosity about the world was still insatiable, but the world he was entering was more complex than he had perhaps imagined. He had mapped coastlines, charted the stars, and met people whose cultures stretched back millennia. Now, his second voyage would take him beyond the known world, into the freezing, dangerous waters of the Antarctic, pushing the boundaries of exploration even further. By 1772, Captain James Cook's reputation as one of the greatest navigators of his time was firmly established. Yet, despite the vast expanses of the Pacific he had charted on his first voyage, one tantalizing mystery remained: the existence of the fabled southern continent, known as Terra Australis. For centuries, explorers had speculated about a massive landmass lying somewhere in the southern oceans, a mythical place that would balance the world's geography. The Royal Society, eager to settle this question once and for all, turned once again to Cook, entrusting him with a mission that would push the very boundaries of exploration. The voyage was daunting in its ambition. Cook would not just be sailing into uncharted waters, he would be venturing into the coldest, most inhospitable regions of the earth. His ships, Resolution and Adventure, were fitted for this exact purpose, with reinforced hulls to withstand the icy seas they would encounter. The crew, seasoned but wary, knew they were heading into the unknown, where the line between bravery and foolhardiness blurred. Cook himself was undeterred. He had already mapped vast sections of the Pacific, but this journey would take him farther than any man had gone before, into the heart of the Antarctic waters. As Resolution and Adventure sailed south, the atmosphere aboard the ships grew more sombre with each passing mile. The sun hung lower in the sky, and the air grew colder with every day. Icebergs, like towering white sentinels, drifted by, prove that it did not exist. The pursuit of knowledge for him outweighed the risks, even when those risks were immense. The journey to the Antarctic was fraught with challenges. As Cook's ships ventured deeper into the southern latitudes, the cold became brutal, seeping into the bones of the men aboard. Ice began to cling to the rigging, and the very sea seemed to freeze around them. Cook's journal captures the unforgiving nature of this landscape. Here, at the edge of the world, we found no mythical land, only ice and endless ocean. The dream of Terra Australis evaporated with each frigid gust of wind, replaced by the stark reality of a world that seemed determined to push them back. Yet Cook and his crew pressed on, navigating through the maze of ice floes and treacherous seas. There was no glory to be found in these frozen waters, only survival. The Antarctic waters were a vast, indifferent expanse, filled with nothing but the eerie sound of creaking wood as the ships strained against the icy grip of the sea. The isolation weighed heavily on the crew, and the cold gnawed at their spirits. But Cook's resolve never wavered. He knew that even if Terra Australis remained a myth, his detailed charts of the southern oceans would be invaluable to future explorers. In his mind, discovery was not just about finding new lands, but understanding the world's limits. Though the Antarctic yielded no great southern continent, Cook's second voyage was far from fruitless. He discovered and mapped several Pacific islands, including New Caledonia and the South Sandwich Islands, expanding European knowledge of the South Pacific. These islands, though remote and often desolate, represented another piece of the puzzle in understanding the vast network of islands that dotted the Pacific. Cook's meticulous charts and observations would once again prove indispensable, opening up new routes for sailors and traders alike. But even more than the physical discoveries, it was the sheer daring of Cook's second voyage that solidified his legacy. No one had ever sailed so far south. No one had ventured into the Antarctic with such purpose. His determination to explore the very edges of the known world was a testament to his relentless pursuit of knowledge. The cold may have numbed the crew's bodies, and the isolation may have weighed on their minds, but Cook saw this voyage as a triumph of human spirit over the harshest elements nature could throw at them. Cook's return to England in 1775 was met with widespread admiration. He had not found the fabled southern continent, but he had pushed the boundaries of exploration farther than anyone had thought possible. His maps of the southern oceans were praised for their accuracy, and the scientific community hailed his contributions to the understanding of Earth's geography. He had ventured beyond the known world and returned to tell the tale, a feat few could claim. As Cook reflected on the voyage, it was clear that the search for Terra Australis had been about more than just finding new land. It was about expanding the limits of what was possible, about proving that the human spirit could endure even in the harshest of conditions. He had faced down the icy winds of the Antarctic and returned not just with maps and observations, but with the knowledge that the world was larger and more mysterious than anyone had imagined. But Cook's thirst for exploration was far from quenched. His second voyage had taken him to the edge of the world, but he was already looking to the horizon, wondering what lay beyond. His next journey would take him on one final, fateful voyage, one that would lead to both great discoveries and unspeakable tragedy. The Pacific had more secrets to reveal, but it also held dangers that even a man as skilled and experienced as Cook could not foresee. The stage was set for his third and final voyage, a journey that would bring Cook face to face with the limits of his own humanity. By 1776, Captain James Cook had become a legend in his own time. He had charted vast stretches of the Pacific, ventured farther south than any explorer before him, and returned each time with invaluable knowledge. But even after 2 monumental voyages, the thirst for discovery still burned within him. His third and final expedition was driven by one of the great geographic mysteries of the age, the search for the Northwest Passage, a fabled route that would connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans through the Arctic seas. It was a daunting mission, but if anyone could accomplish it, it was Cook. This final journey began with familiar excitement and purpose. Cook, now an older and seasoned leader, once again took command of the Resolution, with the Discovery as its companion. Setting sail in 1776, they travelled westward, exploring the northern reaches of the Pacific. The journey would lead Cook to new coasts and waters, but it would also take him to the shores where his life would tragically end. The weight of his previous accomplishments was always with him, but this voyage felt different, darker, as if the world itself had shifted during his years away. The ships first arrived in Hawaii in 1778, known then as the Sandwich Islands, a name Cook himself had given them. The reception was warm, almost reverent. The Hawaiian people, upon seeing the towering vessels and the strange visitors from the sea, welcomed Cook and his crew as if they were gods. They were intrigued by the newcomers and the extraordinary ships that had seemingly appeared from nowhere. Cook, for his part, was fascinated by the Hawaiians, their rich culture, their complex social structures, and their deep connection to the land and sea. His journals speak of the generosity and hospitality with which they were treated. It was a peaceful time, one marked by exchange and mutual curiosity, the kind of encounter Cook had always hoped for. But the search for the Northwest Passage could not wait. After his time in Hawaii, Cook set his sights northward once more, exploring the rugged coastlines of Alaska and the Pacific Northwest. The conditions were brutal. Icy winds, thick fog, and dangerous waters made navigation nearly impossible. Yet Cook pressed on, his determination as strong as ever. He mapped the coastline with his usual precision, but the elusive passage remained hidden. The relentless weather and isolation took a toll on the crew. For months they battled the elements, but each attempt to push farther north was met with the same harsh resistance from the frozen seas. By the time Cook returned to Hawaii in 1779, the atmosphere had changed. The once warm and welcoming relationship between the Europeans and the islanders had begun to sour. Small misunderstandings festered into larger tensions. Cook and his crew, worn down by the hardships of their Arctic journey, were in need of supplies and rest, and they anchored their ships in Kealakekua Bay. But the islanders were no longer in awe resources. The tension came to a head when one of Cook's smaller boats was stolen by the Hawaiians, an act that ignited a series of unfortunate events. Cook, always one to maintain strict discipline, demanded the return of the boat, but the islanders, for whom this was an act of resistance, refused. In an attempt to assert control, Cook made the fateful decision to go ashore and take the island's chief hostage, hoping to use him as leverage to retrieve the stolen vessel. It was a plan born out of desperation and misjudgment, a rare moment where Cook's usually sharp instincts failed him. The confrontation quickly spiraled out of control. As Cook and his men attempted to take the chief, a scuffle broke out on the beach. What began as a tense negotiation turned into chaos, with both sides caught in a sudden eruption of violence. Amid the confusion, Cook was struck down. His death was swift and brutal, his body falling to the very shores where he had once been celebrated. Captain Cook met his untimely end on these shores, a tragic close to a legendary career, wrote one of his officers in the aftermath, capturing the shock and disbelief that rippled through both the crew and the native islanders. Cook's death marked a turning point, not just for his men, but for the world. For the Hawaiians, it was a moment of conflict that had escalated beyond their control, a tragic miscommunication with devastating consequences. For the Europeans, it was the loss of one of their greatest explorers, a man who had opened up new worlds and brought back knowledge that reshaped the maps of the time. Cook's body was ceremonially treated by the Hawaiians in accordance with their customs, and parts of him were eventually returned to his crew. But the legacy of that day lingered, heavy with the weight of what could have been a peaceful ending. The impact of Cook's death rippled far beyond the shores of Hawaii. News of the tragedy spread across Europe, and Cook's name took on a new meaning. He was no longer just the intrepid navigator who had mapped the Pacific. He was a symbol of both the triumphs and the perils of exploration. His career, which had begun with such promise and success, ended in violence and misunderstanding. A reminder that the world Cook sought to chart was not just a blank space waiting to be filled. It was a world already inhabited, with its own stories, its own histories, and its own conflicts. The significance of Cook's death cannot be overstated. For the Hawaiians, it was a clash between two worlds, a tragic encounter that reflected the growing tension between indigenous cultures and European expansion. For the British, it was the loss of a hero, a man who had pushed the boundaries of the known world and brought back knowledge that would shape future generations of explorers. Cook's legacy was now entwined with the very lands and peoples he had sought to understand. His life a testament to the complex and often fragile nature of discovery. As we look back on Cook's final voyage, we see the duality of exploration, its power to expand human knowledge, but also its potential for conflict and tragedy. The Pacific, once a vast unknown, had been charted, but at what cost? Cook's death on the shores of Hawaii marked the end of an era, a moment when the relentless drive for discovery collided with the reality of a world already lived in by others. But Captain James Cook's story does not end with his death. His legacy, shaped by both his triumphs and his mistakes, continues to resonate today. His voyages changed the way the world saw the Pacific, and his maps would guide generations of explorers long after his passing. Now, we must consider what remains of his legacy, both the knowledge he brought back and the lasting impact on the peoples and places he encountered. Captain James Cook's legacy is as vast and complex as the oceans he once sailed. His voyages mark the dawn of a new era in exploration, where the unknown was no longer a distant dream, but a tangible reality. His meticulous charts and maps, crafted with an extraordinary eye for detail, changed how the world saw the Pacific, unlocking a region that had remained hidden from European eyes for centuries. These maps were so precise, so revolutionary, that they remained in use for decades after his death, guiding countless ships through the treacherous waters of the South Pacific and beyond. In the realm of cartography, Cook stands as a towering figure, someone who transformed the chaotic expanse of the ocean into something navigable and understood. Cook's contributions to exploration extended far beyond his maps. He expanded not just the physical boundaries of the world, but also the European understanding of the peoples and cultures of the Pacific. Through his journals and observations, Cook introduced Europe to societies that had developed in isolation for thousands of years. He documented their customs, their languages, their way of life, offering a window into worlds that were, until then, entirely unknown. For many Europeans, these accounts ignited a sense of wonder about the diversity of human civilization, showing that the world was far larger and more complex than they had ever imagined. Yet, Cook's voyages were not just about discovery, they were also about empire. As he charted new lands and made contact with indigenous peoples, Cook was laying the groundwork for the expansion of British influence across the South Pacific. His detailed maps and reports became the foundation upon which future colonization efforts would be built. The territories he explored, from New Zealand to Australia to Hawaii, would soon find themselves at the centre of British and European interests. Cook's exploration opened the door to trade, to settlement, and ultimately to colonization, reshaping the political landscape of the Pacific forever. But Cook's legacy is a complicated one. As much as he is celebrated for his brilliance as a navigator and explorer, his name also evokes the darker side of exploration. The displacement of indigenous peoples, the disruption of their cultures, and the beginning of a long period of European imperialism. For many, Cook is seen as a hero, a man who expanded the boundaries of the known world and brought back knowledge that altered the course of history. As historian J.C. Beaglehole once wrote, he expanded the boundaries of the known world, forever altering the course of history. However, for others, Cook represents something more troubling. His voyages, while rooted in curiosity and discovery, also paved the way for the exploitation and colonization of the Pacific. The arrival of Europeans following in Cook's footsteps brought with it disease, violence, and cultural upheaval. The indigenous peoples of the Pacific, who had once welcomed Cook with curiosity and hospitality, find themselves struggling to maintain their way of life in the face of relentless European expansion. This duality is what makes Cook's legacy so complex. On one hand, he was a visionary, a man who dared to venture where few had gone before, mapping the world with precision and care. His contributions to science, navigation, and exploration are undeniable, and his impact on European understanding of the Pacific is profound. But, on the other hand, his voyages were a catalyst for the imperialist ambitions of the British Empire, a force that would forever alter the lives of the people who lived in the lands he charted. The mixed nature of Cook's legacy reflects the broader tension between exploration and empire. Exploration, in its purest form, is about expanding knowledge, about discovering the unknown and learning from it. But in Cook's time, exploration was also deeply tied to power, to the ability of European nations to claim and control new territories. Cook's achievements cannot be separated from the imperialist context in which they took place, and this is why his legacy remains a subject of debate today. For some, Captain Cook is a symbol of human curiosity, a man whose insatiable desire to explore the world led to some of the greatest discoveries of his age. For others, he is a reminder of the costs of that curiosity, the lands taken, the cultures disrupted, the people displaced. His legacy is both a triumph and a tragedy, a reflection of the complex and often contradictory nature of exploration itself. As we reflect on Cook's life and voyages, we must grapple with both sides of his story. His contributions to cartography, navigation, and scientific knowledge are extraordinary, but the consequences of his voyages, intended or not, are equally significant. The Pacific world he helped reveal to Europe was not a blank canvas waiting to be discovered. It was a living, breathing network of cultures and societies with rich histories of their own, histories that were forever changed by Cook's arrival. Cook's legacy endures, not just in the maps he left behind, but in the debates his life continues to inspire. His voyages remain a symbol of the human spirit's desire to explore, to seek out the unknown, but they also serve as a reminder of the complexities of discovery. What is gained and what is lost when new worlds are brought into the light? The story of Captain James Cook is far from a simple tale of heroism or conquest. It is a story of discovery, yes, but also one of conflict, misunderstanding, and unintended consequences. As we turn to reflect on his legacy in full, we must ask ourselves what his voyages truly meant, not just for the world he left behind, but for the world he ventured into. As we bring our journey through the life of Captain James Cook to a close, it's hard not to feel awe for the incredible path he charted, both literally and figuratively. His voyages, filled with daring and curiosity, forever changed the way the world was seen and understood. From the icy waters of the Antarctic to the sun-soaked shores of Hawaii, Cook sailed farther than anyone before him, uncovering new lands, peoples, and knowledge that would ripple through history for centuries. He wasn't just a navigator of seas. He was a navigator of the unknown, driven by an unrelenting desire to explore the edges of the world. In ways, Cook's life represents the best of human ambition. The push to go farther, see more, and understand what lies beyond the horizon. His detailed maps opened up new frontiers, making previously inaccessible regions navigable for generations of explorers who followed. He connected continents and cultures that had lived in isolation for millennia, sparking new interactions between the Pacific and Europe. It's a remarkable achievement, one that remains deeply embedded in the fabric of world history. But his story, as we've seen, is also a reflection of the complexities of exploration. While Cook's voyages brought new knowledge to Europe, they also ushered in a wave of imperialism and colonization that disrupted the lives of the very peoples he encountered. His name is celebrated for his courage and contributions to cartography, yet it is also remembered by indigenous peoples as the beginning of a difficult chapter. Cook's legacy is one of both discovery and consequence, a reminder that exploration, even when driven by noble intentions, can have profound and lasting impacts. Though his life was cut short in the sands of Hawaii, Captain Cook's spirit of discovery lives on. His voyages were the first steps toward a world more connected, for better or worse. He opened the door to the Pacific, revealing its mysteries to a global audience. Though he met a tragic end, Captain Cook's voyages opened new frontiers for exploration and global interaction, and it is that pursuit of knowledge and understanding that continues to inspire explorers and thinkers to this day. In reflecting on his life, I find myself struck by the contrast between the man and the myth. Cook was both a visionary and a product of his time, a man whose ambition was as vast as the oceans he sailed. He leaves behind a legacy that cannot be easily defined as wholly good or bad, but must be seen in the full complexity of the history he helped shape. His achievements were monumental, but so too were the unintended consequences of his presence in the lands he explored. As we close the book on Cook's story, let's not forget the lessons his life teaches us. Exploration is about more than discovering new places. It's about learning from them, understanding them, and recognizing that the world is filled with histories and cultures far older than our own. Captain Cook's voyages remind us of the importance of curiosity, respect, and the delicate balance between discovery and responsibility. If you've enjoyed this peaceful exploration of history, I invite you to subscribe for more content just like this, calming, informative, and filled with the stories of those who shaped the world. As we continue our journey through the past, there are many more tales to tell, each one a new chapter in the unfolding story of humanity. Thank you for joining me on this voyage through time. Make sure to tune in tomorrow for more historical journeys, and as always,